Bob's parents met on a picket line.
Both his parents were leftist organizers in the garment industry in New York City, and they had, though, a very harsh life. And Bobby tells all these stories about Ida, the FBI, coming to the house, and, and her slamming the door, in front of the FBI agent, whomever, and Bobby's basically being followed and running from one subway train to the other as a yipsel. So he's suffered McCarthyism. He's suffered. But Ida has this fierceness that, she was not intimidated.
She had been such an incredible influence, both his parents, on Bob's life. His father was a knitter, and an expert knitter, but a knitter, and his mother worked in the garment factories. And he never forgot them about their history. And he always, in his heart, he is such a pro-labor guy.
During a garment inspection that we did in Southern California, I forget what year it was, in the late 90s, and he was actually going along with the workplace inspection, just observing the investigators, talking to the workers, talking to the employers, and he came across this huge machine. It was a knitting machine. And he looked at it and he called me over and he said, this machine does exactly what my father did by hand. My father would be out of a job. And I thought that was very telling of his background and a good opportunity to learn a little bit about him.
Because Bobby, when I first met him, was working for City Lights, and he got fired from City Lights. And Bobby had been writing this thing on how the U.S. got involved in Vietnam, basically a pamphlet. He'd been doing research for it, because when I first met him, I remember on his wall, he had all these people he was going to interview, this whole list. So he was writing that, and so that, how the U.S. got involved, the research for that, basically was some of what he was talking to Hinkle about, and then Hinkle wanted him to write for Rampart. So that was how they got together.
And I think the magazine was very influential because the magazine brought truth to the question of what was going on in Vietnam. I mean, Bob helped expose, and the magazine helped expose, what the CIA was doing, the Michigan State Project, which is how Bob met Stanley Scheinbaum.
Ramparts was under his direction, and Warren Hinkle, who sort of masterminded the publication of it, but Scheer was its editorial guide. And I think Ramparts was a flag for protesters to read.
And Bobby and I went to Vietnam in 1964, I guess, 65. Anyway, we went on a trip with Stanley Scheinbaum, and we went to Cambodia, and this was after Sihanouk had basically told the United States that to get out of Cambodia, and there were, because of what Ramparts had actually done to some extent, because exposing the CIA involvement in Cambodia.
I think Bob really pulled us all together in the anti-war movement. I really feel like that paper, and maybe it was just my sort of resonating with his words.
And as I said, when he and I and Ed Keating ran for Congress, we were seen as the Ramparts candidates.
Signed up first, I think, when he decided to run for Congress. That we just went into that election as if it were going to really change the world.
So one night, I hear this candidate running for Congress, Bob Scheer, this beard, and I came back to my guys and I said, man, I just met a bad white dude. And they said, really? I said, yeah, you gotta hear this guy. His name is Bob Scheer. I said, man, he was straight ahead. I said, I've never heard a person running for office speak so clearly and so right to the point. I said, man, he blew me away. I said, really? I said, you gotta come hear this guy.
I always tell Bob that he was responsible for my starting Chez Panisse, because when he ran for Congress and he lost, I just gave up politics. I just never wanted to vote again. I didn't believe. I I just said, I'm going to go do something else.
But we approached the struggle, and Bob Scheer approached the struggle from a position of optimism and idealism. All right? So we have the audacity to think we could actually change things.
That's why he ran for Congress. He ran for Congress because he wanted to have a platform to speak out against the Vietnam War. And he got 45% of the vote. So he came very close, perilously close, as he would say, to actually being a congressperson.
And I think if there's a place where I'd like to believe that we were joined at the hip, was that for both of us, peace became our passion. And because I think we both heard Martin Luther King, who said, peace is more than simply the absence of war, it's the presence of justice. And so to talk about peace forces you to talk about justice.
But Bobby, the bombing of Cambodia was so, because we'd been to Cambodia, I love Cambodia, Vietnam, and so I had never seen him cry before until the bombing of Cambodia. He just got on this bench and he started crying. And if you think of his books on multinational corporations, the Vietnam War and then this war in Iraq, he's done his absolutely best writing